see the first and the foremost, the most oldest classification system that was proposed for Mullerian anomalies. It is a Jones and Rock classification given in 1953. So, as we understood from the last lecture, it is the initial part of the today's lecture is going to be a revision from your previous class on embryology. So, it was understood that either there is a defect in the midline fusion of the two Mullerian ducts, or there is unilateral maturation, the other side is not getting mature, or there is a defect in canalization. So these are the three broad subheadings under which further classification of each part of the female genital tract was observed, and it was devised. So if you see defect of midline fusion, it is either at the level of the fundus. So if you remember from previous class, the two Mullerian ducts from the opposite sides come and fuse in midline. So there is a defect at the level of fundus with single cervix and vagina. The lower part has fused, but type 1 says that there is a defect at fundus. It can result in two types of Mullerian anomalies. Either it is a septate uterus, where there is a complete septum with no communicating cavities. There is a partial septum with communicating cavities, or there are bicornuate uterus. The two horns are totally separate. Type 2 is defect of cervix and of vagina, and there is single fundus. So the problem is lower down. First will be at the level of fundus. Second problem is at the lower level, which is at the level of cervix and of vagina. This is further subclassified into four parts: septate vagina, single or septate vagina with separate cervix. So this is little complicated to understand. Just understand the various subheadings. Third is failure of fusion at all levels, which is called as uterus diadelphys. So if you understand this classification system, you will feel that, this was so comprehensive. Why do we need more revisions into it? Let's see what are the drawbacks of this classification system and why there were better revisions and better understanding of the Mullerian anomalies that was later seen. The second classification, the second component to this is unilateral maturation, where there is maturation of single Mullerian system, where there is unilateral development with absence of the opposite tract. So unilateral maturation with rudimentary opposite tract, or there is complete absence of the opposite tract, which may or may not communicate. Third is the defect of canalization, which results in septa formation. So there is defect of longitudinal canalization of the vagina, which results in transverse vaginal septa at various levels, which is called as transverse vaginal shelves or septa. Second is complete atresia of the vagina, which is the extreme degree of this type. But it was not entirely comprehensive, and there were so many other problems which were found in this particular classification system, and hence there was a need to devise more classification systems. Next came in 1979 was the Buttram and Gibbons classification system, which has 5 classes. It categorized the Mullerian anomalies into 5 classes. The class 1 talks about segmental Mullerian agenesis or hypoplasia. Class 2 is unicornuate, which is most frequently, this one presents with an abnormal shaped uterus and was associated with an increased incidence of preterm labor and malpresentations. So class 2, it was very simple to remember. I used to remember as HUD, HUD B, HUD BS, like it's H. The mnemonic that I used was HU. Let me use another pen. HOD, bullshit. HUD. So this was HUD and not HOD. So this is the HOD's bullshit was Buttram. H for hypoplasia. Class 2 was unicornuate. Unicornuate is more frequently associated with the obstetric problems. Class 3 was diadelphys, which is most frequently presented with abnormal ultrasound findings and is also associated with preterm delivery. Class 4 was bicornuate, which is associated with preterm labor, breech presentations, and cesarean deliveries. Class 5 is septate uterus, which is often incidentally diagnosed. It might be asymptomatic, but associated with high first trimester losses. It is a cause of recurrent first trimester losses as well. An additional category. So the very big advantage of Buttram and Gibbons was they were the first classification system which included DES, that is diethylstilbestrol related Mullerian anomalies, particularly hypoplasia or hypoplastic uterus or T-shaped cavity, which is very, very characteristic of DES. This was the first time this was included in this classification system. The third came the AFS and the ASRM classification system in 1995. The ASRM system remains the most widely accepted. The limitation includes that it lacks the classification of congenital uterovaginal anomalies and complex genitourinary anomalies. So this is the limitation of the ASRM classification system. Again, see, that was the mnemonic which I gave you, falls accurate with most of the classification system. If you see here again, here also you have hypoplasia or aplasia, H, U for unicornuate, D for diadelphys, B for bicornuate, S for septate. So HOD BS, HOD BS is again standing true here. The other two anomalies which were included was anarchoid uterus and diethylstilbestrol. DES was first included by Buttram and Gibbons, which was further taken by AFS and ASRM. So the other two was AD. After AD is after death, like after the nominee. So this is AD was an additional add-on in AFS. Clear to all of you? Any doubts, any queries till now? So if you have to reproduce this kind of an Mullerian anomaly onto your notes, onto your surgical note, this is how you represent it. You write the type of anomaly, class 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, whatever. Treatment, the surgical procedures, prognosis for conception and subsequent viable infant. You have to prognosticate the patient. This was the advantage why this classification system was introduced. AFS and ASRM were talking about the prognosis of each Mullerian anomaly. They also gave a recommended follow-up treatment. Additional findings were documented, which is vagina, cervix, tubes. So there was an additional column of additional findings, right? This was not included per se in the classification system. This vagina, cervix, tubes, kidneys were not finding a standing within the classification system. So this was a major drawback. You can draw your intraoperative findings here. So this was the proposal given by AFS Society, that is American Fertility Society. Any doubts till now? Any confusion? Anything you all want to ask? Or should we proceed with other types of classification systems? Next came Asian et al., which is very, very logical, and it is one of the favorite by many of the consultants because they have their mindset through Asian et al., which was given in 2004. It is one of the questions also which is sometimes asked. So they said there are 5 possible locations for the origin of the 6 groups of malformation. Number 1 is agenesis or hypoplasia of the entire urogenital ridge. Mesonephric anomalies with absence of Wolffian duct opening into the urogenital sinus and the urethral bud sprouting. You can understand Asian et al. Only if you understand the embryology better. That was the whole reason why we included detailed embryology in last class and we talked only about embryology. Third is an isolated Mullerian anomalies, which is similar to the ASRM system. Gubernaculum dysfunction, then is anomalies of the urogenital sinus, and there is malformative combinations, which was first time introduced by Asian et al. Clear to all of you? Next came Opelt et al. In 2005, which gave something similar to TNM staging. The TNM staging, which is used for tumor, that is tumor, nodes, and metastasis. So similarly, they said we will label Mullerian anomalies as VCU-AUM, vacuum classification, which does not spell like vacuum. Vagina, cervix, uterus, adnexa, and associated malformations. So they said V3, V4, or V what, see this agenesis or hypoplasia, uterus, diadelphys, bicornuate, adnexa, there could be endometriosis or it is normal, and associated malformations may renal malformation, horseshoe kidney. So this is how the labeling was done, and Opelt et al. Gave this proposal. Next came Grimbis et al. In 2012. They said that the ASRM model and Asian's embryological one, they combined the two. This was widely adopted by ESHRE, ESGE groups, which is ESHRE is European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology. ESGE is European Society for Gynecological Endoscopy, under the working group CONUTA. CONUTA is very, very important. You have to know this terminology whenever you're reading classification systems of Mullerian. What is CONUTA? It is Congenital Uterine Anomalies Group. So if you see in adenomyosis also, you have MUSA group, which gave the whole classification and diagnosis system for adenomyosis. MUSA is for adenomyosis. Similarly, the working group for congenital anomalies or Mullerian anomalies was CONUTA. So what is the characteristics of this classification system? It is based on the anatomy is the basis of the systemic categorization. Deviation of uterine anatomy deriving from the same embryological area are the basis of design of the main classes. Subclasses are anatomical variations of the main classes. Cervical and vaginal anomalies are classified as independent supplementary subclasses. So it is very important this point, cervical and vaginal anomalies are independently subcategorized here. It is based on anatomical categorization. So, you can logically also understand if somebody like SG and ESHRE, so they will talk about reproduction. SJ is about gynae endoscopy, so they will based upon anatomy. And it's because it's ESHRE, they talk about human embryology and reproduction. So embryological origin is also being taken into consideration. And subclasses, whatever subclasses are there, they are the anatomical variations, and they have given due respect to cervical and vaginal anomalies as well. Clear to all of you? So this was the ESHRE and SG classification of female genital tract anomalies. They said U0 to U6, UCV are the main headings that you have to remember. UCV. U for uterus, where U0 is normal uterus, dysmorphic uterus, septate uterus, bicorporal uterus, hemiuterus, aplastic uterus, and unclassified. C stands for C0 to C4. It is formula U6, C4, V4, 644. UCV. So C, if you see, that is normal septate, double or normal cervix, unilateral cervical aplasia. V for normal vagina, longitudinal, non-obstructing vaginal septum, longitudinal, obstructing vaginal septum, transverse vaginal septum, and vaginal aplasia altogether. So one easy method to remember, जो last category है, U6 तो unclassified हो गया, whether it is U5, C4, V4, they are all aplasia. And the first is normal. Anything abnormal lies in between. Clear to all of you? Any doubts, any confusion? This also gives us a place to enter the associated anomalies of non-Mullerian origin, and we have to draw the anomaly here as per the ESHRE SG classification system. Are you all clear till now? Any doubts, any confusion? Anybody wants to ask anything before we go with diagnostic approach to Mullerian? Ab interesting part will start now. So this was the dry and the boring part, which is to be remembered anyhow, but the interesting part will start now. Before that, can you all just give me a thumbs up? Should I go ahead? Yes, no, YN, YN. Just to ensure that you all are awake and listening. Are you all with me? Yes. Okay. I got one yes. I'm happy with that. Okay. So let's move ahead. Diagnostic approach to Mullerian anomalies. What are the things that you have to, now you have to be with me through the next half of the lecture, because it will deal with total mathematics. How to approach a Mullerian anomaly. If you are understanding what you're talking today, your life will be so easy. You will start loving Mullerian anomalies as a topic per se. It's my favorite topic, and I desperately chose for this one. First of all, I think age at diagnosis gives you a working diagnosis most of the times in any kind of Mullerian anomalies. What is the age of presentation of the patient? The symptoms that the patient is presenting, you have to pay heed to each and every symptom that the patient is talking about. Heterogeneous findings can be associated. You have to be very, very mindful about the Tanner staging of breast, axillary hair, pubic hair, external genitalia. I have not included images of Tanner staging because there was so much other things to include. We've tried to put that in primary amenorrhea chapter, the Tanner staging. Next, we will discuss and elaborate about diagnostic imaging. I have few interesting images to share with you all. So, sorry, don't mind my font sizes today. My presentation is little haywire. The changes did not get saved and it got uploaded just directly. So when you talk about examination, we discuss about the breast development and Tanner staging, very important. Second is about axillary and pubic hair. Very important is to examine the external genitalia. So if you have a careful and thorough examination of the external genitalia and the hymenal orifice, just one. So if you talk about, so after doing a thorough examination of breast, Tanner staging, axillary hair, pubic hairs, make a diagram of your notes whenever you're seeing such a patient in OPD or admitted in your ward, planned for a surgical procedure, or even for examination under anesthesia. Make diagrams. Write down what is the breast Tanner staging for this patient and what is expected of this age. What are the axillary hair and pubic hair like? What is the distribution? How do they resemble? Which Tanner staging are they at? So you will know whether the chronological age of the patient is matching with the reproductive age of the patient or not. So it will give you an idea. अब आपको पता है estrogen predominate करेगा तो क्या organs develop होंगे, testosterone है तो क्या चीजें develop, Y chromosome है, testosterone है, will result in internal genitalia development, dihydrotestosterone will help in external genitalia development, right? Estrogen alone, double X, only estrogen, both internal genitalia, external genitalia is being taken care by estrogen. This is the basic revision from the last class. So now if you do a thorough and careful inspection of the external genitalia and the hymenal orifice, you will know whether hymen is present, not present, imperforate hymen hai, nahi hai, vagina length, how much is the depth of the vagina, whether it is, are you dealing with the case of transverse vaginal septum, longitudinal vaginal septum, or cervical atresia. What are the lab investigations? You need not order lab investigations in all your patients. Sometimes, if needed, you have to order gonadotropins and sex steroid hormone levels where you have ambiguous genitalia या जहाँ पे भी confusion है. Some of the cases are very clear and you need to order very, very minimal investigations. For example, I'll tell you one patient of MRKH I operated almost 2 weeks back. We did a Mackendo vaginoplasty for this patient. So her Tanner staging was underdeveloped and I felt that there was unilateral left side of the ovary was also seen in inguinal region, left side kidney was absent or probably it was ectopic in location. So I ordered an MRI pelvis to also ultrasound KUB and only karyotype. I did not order any kind of hormonal levels because I felt the external genitalia looked normal. Although the levels were low, probably because she might have been having less estrogen exposure in her life. But her karyotype came out to be 46XX, and I was sure that we are dealing with the right MRKH syndrome only, and there is nothing to deviate from these. Karyotype and FISH determination of the SRY gene is useful to understand a discordance between the phenotype and genotype of the individual. Only when you are suspecting any kind of a discordance in the appearance of the genitalia, that is the external genital appearance, and the phenotype, like the phenotype physical appearance and genotype में अगर आपको discordance suspected है, only then you order a karyotype with FISH for SRY gene. Further genetic screening may be indicated in the presence of dysmorphic features suggestive of a genetic syndrome. Any doubts till now? Anybody wants to ask anything? Coming to the history and physical examination, clinical history, what is most relevant is the menstrual history. A good thorough menstrual history will tell you everything about the diagnosis of Mullerian anomalies, bowel bladder dysfunction, sexual activity, pelvic pain, reproductive history when relevant. Child or adolescent parent may be involved for obtaining medical history, including results of any kind of prenatal testing or imaging that were used. Like suppose there is a finding in the newborn itself. So you would want to look at the level 2 ultrasound and other ultrasounds of the patient. Family history, family associations of Mullerian anomalies are found. It can have multifactorial and polygenic inheritance pattern. In AIMS, I remember we used to have 3 sisters coming from the same family, and they had some or the other Mullerian anomaly linked into the entire. So that was a case series rather that was published. So with this, the individuals with an affected first degree relative have a 12 times increased risk of having Mullerian anomalies. Transcription factors in abnormal Mullerian development are these following: WNT, DATCH, HOX, and SOX9. These are the ones which we read in last class, if you all remember. So coming to the first group of anomalies, prepubertal diagnosis of obstructed anomalies. Prepubertal, like the puberty has not been attained for the patient, and there is obstructive anomalies. First, if you talk about a neonate, what are the obstructive anomalies that you suspect in a neonate? They usually present with an abdominal mass. Genital examination of the neonate can reveal, number one, what are the differential diagnoses of obstructed anomalies in a neonate? They are imperforate hymen, persistent urogenital sinus, or a single perineal orifice consistent with the cloacal malformation. So I'll just show you 1 or 2 diagrams here. So this is a hydrocolpos associated with an obstructed outflow tract that may be evident by the presence of an abdominal mass at birth or identified on prenatal ultrasound. So if you can see, there is the fetal bladder is clearly visible there. This is an antenatal ultrasound where you can see uterine diadelphys with hydrometrocolpos. So this is a fetal ultrasound that revealed this finding, that once the fetal bladder was distended, there is uterine diadelphys with a hydrometrocolpos present there. Inside a prepubertal will not have hematometra, right, or a hematocolpos. They will have hydrometrocolpos. Water can only be present there. So next differential is when there is something called as mucocolpos in newborns. When mucocolpos due to imperforate hymen is present in the neonate, a hymenal bulge can be seen. How will you diagnose a imperforate hymen in a neonate? It is very difficult. Usually imperforate hymens are diagnosed at menarche or at the time of puberty when they start menstruating and there is no outflow to the menstrual blood. But in neonates, there will be mucocolpos, right? So if you can see in the diagram, the examiner has just very gently separated the labia in this newborn. You can also see the meconium there. So this is mucocolpos that is there because of the imperforate hymen in the neonate. A hymenal bulge is very clearly evident here. Why does this mucocolpus develop in this newborn? So when the maternal hormones are getting withdrawn, the mucocolpus is absorbed gradually. It will go on its own. You need not do any kind of a surgical intervention right now. So only a thin membrane is covering the introitus that is remaining. So sometimes if they insist, or if you want to find out other associated anomalies, an examination under anesthesia and vaginoscopy using a 9.5 French cystoscope can be used to clarify the length of the vagina malformation and assess for a persistent urogenital sinus or cloacal malformation. But usually we do not do such invasive procedures in newborns, only when we have suspected associated urogenital sinus or any kind of a cloacal malformation. Only then this kind of an approach is usually done for a newborn. Clear? Any doubt so far? Should we proceed? So this is how in a young adolescent a vaginoscopic approach is being performed, and we are trying to establish the Mullerian anomaly in a infant. Management. So usually this might need an early intervention before menarche. Why do we need to have an early intervention? But usually we still do it after 10 years, like just before the onset of menstruation or just before menarche, to prevent the possible potential complications associated. Just agar outflow obstruction hai, so the patient will have some kind of a backflow changes, endometriosis, endometrioma, hematometra, hematocolpos, pyometra, pyocolpos, all that can happen, right? You want to prevent those potential complications. If you miss it at the level at an early stage and you diagnose later during adolescence, what are the possible complications that can happen? Patient might come to you with pelvic pain associated with hematocolpos. There could be constipation because of pressure on rectum. There could be urinary retention. There could be endometriosis, PID, ectopic pregnancy, and fertility compromises can happen. So that's why it's important to diagnose and have an early intervention in these patients.